the values that you need in order to accelerate in your work. We have, when we go to the next slide, I learned from a past project which is called HOTMAPS, and you will also see this in trainings and in our documents that we referenced. Quite some experience. HOTMAPS itself was was a project that was only focusing on energy planning, so that means mainly the heat demand and building up on this, where we found that a lot of data is already available, but it's unstructured. So you basically know this problem when you get an Excel sheet from a colleague. You have to look through it and understand how that person structured the data to be able to work with this. And
sorry,
that
Jakob, I have to stop you.
When you get
we can hear your echo. Do you have the live open, maybe another window?
The data to be able to work with this. I don't, I'll check that, but today it just worked before, but now it looks like, let's see if I'm still connected with my headset. Sorry for that. I didn't change anything on the setup here, but it looks, do you still have the echo?
No, it's all set up. Thank you.
Sorry for that. Again, we tried that before, but it worked 10 minutes ago. Now it seems to play us some games here. So please let me know if I have to change something. Otherwise, I'll continue. So I just said that when you look at data and you learn about the structure, you require metadata, you need some time to study it and often some know-how to go through that. And ideally, when you work over several years on projects, you also need updates and attack the legal challenges of data. How can that data that you have now created ideally be reusable? And that's where we think that curated data is of added value, and that's what will help you find within this project EnerMaps. So I'll go to the next slide. And there we try really to summarize just the current situation. So we see that there is this data out there that's separated in a lot of databases with no quality check. It is data that is stored, but not necessarily easy to find. And if you cannot find it, of course, you cannot reuse it. When you find data, you have to more or less all the time download it on your machine and start to analyze it with different tools. Here, again, we think it's worth taking a first visualization of it before you attack this. And of course, the data-related know-how of your target group might be low. Again, that's capacity that's being built up. But in generally, I think this is an underestimated challenge. How much time do you need to really prepare the data so that you can work with it? So we'll go on the next slide and just a quick reply or recall on the definition. We think that with EnerMaps, we are going to empower the energy transition through the use of fair energy data, because when we have fair energy data, we only have findable, accessible, and interoperable and reusable data, which is the basic definition of fair. It's very important to keep this in mind because that often and unfortunately excludes a lot of data that we could be using in EnerMaps. But especially the legal questions regarding the reusability, well, play us some games, because if the license of data is not clear or sometimes restrictive, we cannot reuse this data. And that's, I think, today still an underestimated challenge of people that provide data, that make it findable, make it maybe also accessible, but not necessarily reusable through centralized platforms like we do it here. So we'll go to the next slide. When we talk about EnerMaps, so we have this open data management tool that really is trying to improve the data management and the accessibility. And I'll demonstrate that shortly. We'll have also this encouragement of creating this energy community that will then help us and also itself and reusing not only the data, but also other elements such as the publications that are linked to it and the software that is developed. And we think that that is a necessary effort that accelerates and then facilitates the energy transition, because those digital platforms can really help the professionals to gain on efficiency in their daily life and to reach the strategic goals that are behind the energy transition. With that, I'll go to the next slide. And I'll just give you a brief overview. I'm not going to talk about all of the consortium today. I'm at the Crem, as already said in the introduction. We have the partners with EUROC, and Eric will take over shortly with the data. EDIAP is helping us on the database side. Tubovin is helping with the experience of HOTMAPS and therefore the data sets itself and the enrichment that they have. OpenAir is the platform that we'll take a look on right away in the European open science infrastructure. eThink with the training, and Revolve that is already that is there and doing the communication and managing today's webinar. So with that, I'll go on the next slide, and just the central objectives are really the energy data sets that we want to gather, want to improve this accessibility, ensure the quality, which is a major part of the work, and increase the energy data knowledge that users can gain in the training so that the energy transition is really accelerated and facilitated. We'll go on the next slide. So how do we fulfill these objectives? And with that, I think I can already hand over to Eric and let him talk a little bit about the data validation and exploitation part. So please, Eric, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Jakob. Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Wilczynski. I work at EUROC Research in Northern Italy. And today I'll be presenting on the data collection, validation, and exploitation process that was undertaken for the EnerMaps project as part of the first work package. And next slide. Actually, the previous slide was fine, sorry. First, I'll begin by introducing why EnerMaps is an important project for energy-related data. I'll then go through the dataset collection process used in the initial inventory creation. Then next, I'll discuss the quality check process before finally discussing the feedback gathering process that was conducted. Next slide. So the core of EnerMaps is in the data itself, which will be the focus of this presentation. Energy data, as Jakob mentioned, it's often difficult to find, located in different repositories, fragmented, which can result in project delays and lost time and money. And EnerMaps seeks to address these issues by providing a quality check database of crucial energy data that will be communicated and disseminated effectively and efficiently using practices that make the data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, or FAIR. As such, data is central to the EnerMaps project, and the EnerMaps data management tool will be a hub for energy data. The purpose of work package 1 of the EnerMaps project was to identify and select the initial data sets, which will form the core of the EnerMaps data management tool, and then to validate these data sets. Next slide. So as mentioned, the main goal of work package 1 was to create the initial inventory of data sets that will be added to the EnerMaps data management tool. Many of these data sets will then undergo a quality check process to assess the quality and consistency of the data. However, there were some criteria that acted as a jumping off point for selecting the data sets. First, renewable energy data was intended to be a large focus for the initial data sets to ensure that the platform was useful for future energy trends in Europe's energy research. In addition, there was an emphasis on data sets from national and European statistical offices, such as Eurostat and European Environmental Agency, due to the high quality of these data sets. And finally, around 15 of the data sets had to be selected from recent publicly financed research and innovation projects. Since data from these projects would especially benefit from EnerMaps, since they're not always well known, they're not always easy to find, and in some cases, they're not easily downloadable or available for download online at all. Okay, next slide. So we took 2 primary steps in assessing the data demands of the energy research community. So first, we gathered insights on crucial energy data categories by conducting a review of journal papers, conference briefs, and similar articles on the common data sets and data demands for energy research, taking note of the types of data used in these papers and any data demands that stakeholders may have mentioned needing but not having access to. Second, we conducted a stakeholder analysis to identify a sample of experts who were then interviewed to assess their energy demands. The selection process was designed to ensure a diversity in experts, both in terms of their field and their demographic background. And experts were asked to provide examples of the data they required most and to describe their user stories for their energy data demands and issues. Next slide. So when selecting the data sets, we consider the following principles. So first, we had to consider the data demands of the energy community that were identified in the previous step, including specific data sets that were recommended by experts. Second, we considered the project prerequisites that were previously mentioned, which included an emphasis on renewable energy data, ensuring that a significant portion were from publicly funded projects, and finally, that the data was either focused on Europe or that Europe was included in the geographic scope of the data set. And finally, we want to consider a diversity of categories to ensure that there was a variety of data selected. Okay, next slide. So next, I'll briefly go over the quality check process, or the QC process. This process is important that it verifies that the data sets are accurate, consistent, complete, and that its creators were transparent with regards to its creation. Next slide. So the first step we had to do before starting the quality check process was categorizing the data sets into 3 levels, which determined the extent of the QC process that each data set underwent. So level 1 data sets were primarily data sets that were identified by experts, and they only underwent a cursory portion of the QC process, including a review from experts, a check for metadata, and were made available for review on the EnerMaps Kialo social network. Level 2 and 3 data sets underwent the same steps as level 1, but also included more involved investigation in the data and their documentation. So level 3 data sets also underwent an additional step and received a high-level comparison with 2 similar data sets. So the core of the quality check process that was conducted on all level 2 and 3 data sets included the methodology check, which is where we checked for the presence of documentation associated with the data set that explains how the data was created. The completeness control, where we conducted a quick analysis of the data set to check for blank or null values. The statistical accuracy check, which was similar to the methodology check in that it checked the documentation for any elaboration on the statistical accuracy of the data set that the creators might have provided. And finally, the consistency analysis, which was conducted by testing the correlation of the data set with a similar data set. For example, 2 measures of the same variable or 2 different measurements that may have been logically correlated, such as electricity consumption and population density. Next slide. And finally, the stakeholder feedback was a vital component of this work package and was a key contribution to the 3 project deliverables that are listed here. As mentioned, external experts were interviewed in order to assess energy demands and gather user stories. These user stories were also used when guiding the development of the EnerMaps data management tool and its features. An internal focus group meeting and review session among consortium members on the dataset collection process was conducted to gather feedback on the process and results. And finally, another group of external experts were interviewed to review and provide feedback on the dataset selection and quality check process. The feedback received from all these tasks were used to improve the dataset inventory and the quality check processes. And that concludes the presentation on data collection and validation, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Eric. So we're gonna start with the demonstration with Jakob. So Jakob, you can share your screen now to guide us into the tool.
Jakob, we can't hear you again.
You need to unmute.
Can we hear me now? Okay.
Now we hear you. Thanks
the classical error when you start. And I hope you can also see my screen. So welcome to the EnerMaps platform on OpenAir. It's still a beta version, which means that there are still some inconsistencies in there, or that might once in a while have lead to a problem. Still, it's worth taking a look at it because it starts to regroup a lot of features that are of interest and that that we have been talking about already now in the presentation. So you can jump on the link here and take a look. As I said before, we look through the EnerMaps. With EnerMaps, we look through the OpenAir research graph in general. That means that we take a look at all the publications and all the data and software that's in there. We filter it by a number of keywords. This is just the beginning. We have about 800 of them, and that is still an ongoing list as we go through the different subject areas, and we exchange with experts like you that are listening today, so that people tell us, hey, but there is something interesting missing, and we can add those keywords. So every 2 weeks, this list is updated. That means that then the number of publications here changes and the research data changes and so on. All the features that changes. Again, this is at the first view just a simple database that you can search. So you can type in, for example, here heat demand, if that is of interest for your subject area, and you can go through the lists that are provided here, and you will quickly see the problem that I just said before. You will have a lot of stuff that pops up, and you will have to start digging through it and see, well, which is exactly what I need. You can here quickly pre-select and say maybe there is only research data that interests me, and then the list again is filtered. You will then now be linked to only 26 data sets that are there. However, the list still in itself might not be satisfying your demand. So you would need to either look more or start to look at each data set. When you click on it, it will show up. You will see the DOIs, the links to it, and you will start to see where you can download it, so that you can really look at the detailed data. And this is the time-consuming part. At least here you have found some data, but maybe you will check it and realize that it's not really what you were looking for. And this is where EnerMaps is really, I think, interesting in taking a look at. When you go back to the portal itself, that you see that are here, those featured data sets. For the moment, we have put on 24 of them. Which means that there are still more that will be added, but as we stated before, we like to add really complete data sets, and we had some problem with metadata that in the meantime was not correctly linked anymore, and so therefore we removed it, but it will be coming back shortly within the next a couple of weeks, 1 or 2, it should be there. So then you can take a look at maybe again the heat density map that we have in here. And you will see that the EnerMaps tool itself provides you with some data, and it will quickly provide you also with the links to the metadata. So as a first step, you can say, hey, why don't we explore this right away and take a look and go on the platform, and the data, as you can see, is slowly popping up now. And take a city, let's say Brussels, for example. You can zoom in here, and you can see the available data. Then you will have within here the legend that is also in the process of being refined to be sure that it gives you quickly and more information. You can see that the link is going back towards the portal, so that you can come back to the data that's in here. So, for example, if you're working on a specific topic linked to Belgium and Brussels, you will see now already after one click that that your data is there, and that you can explain or take a look at further information based on this map. So you have here the different ways of selecting different regions. For example, here the cities that you will then have the little finer maps, the different selections that are available. I will now go to the part which is really the selection itself, because that will allow to take you one step further, not only displaying information, but already starting to explain it and to explore it. So you can here, for example, make a quick polygon as like you feel, and then start exploring what's called the calculation modules, which are modules that some people might know already from HOTMAPS. Those calculation modules try to explore the data that's there. And within this one here specifically, you can take a look at the way of, you can take a look of gathering data on district heating, whether it would make sense or not. To do it within the project, there are more these calculation modules that are coming up, and the links will be shared so that you will see the videos that exist on how to use them and the links on what exactly is calculating in the background. We today now will be just taking a look at a first result, and what will happen now is that the tool is calculating and will give you a potential result on the area. You can now take a look at which is the area that is selected. As we have been in a very dense area of Brussels, you'll see that most of the part would be feasible for district heating. If we zoom in a little bit more, we will see a slight difference between the heat density that we looked at before and the selected area that came out. You can then, for example, say, but that's not exactly the area that I wanted to work on. Maybe we can move this and adapt the polygon to a different area, so that we can save the selection here again and run the calculation module again. And we'll see a different result that will now pop up due to the fact that, of course, we are in a zone that's less populated, and therefore here the density will be much different, much lower. Looks like I clicked twice, so therefore we have twice the same result. As always in a live demo, we have some surprises. As you can see here already in the axis, that the first selection that I made was a very high potential area, whereas this one looks like a very low potential area. And then again, if we look at the detailed result, we'll see that only this extension, of course, would be feasible. So the goal really of the project is not only to bring you closer to data, to visualize the data so that you get a quick idea, but also to give you first tools so that you can explore this data and have a first feeling within a couple clicks of where does this data set lead you, for example, in terms of heat planning, the experiences that we have from HOTMAPS. Can we, with that tool, quickly, for example, launch the heat planning strategy? And within a couple clicks, you have already first number of results that allow you to explore further the data. And of course, once you have done this, maybe you still want to know a little bit more about the data. And what I suggest there is always to go a little bit back and take a look of where does this data come from. So for example, here you have the methodology that shows up so that you can have a document that shows you where does this data come from and how was it elaborated. So what are you building up on? And here, for example, within this documentation that's there, you find that there is a brief resume of it, a summary of it. You'll see the detailed report in case you really need all the details for your work that is linked towards based on the HOTMAPS project. But you also see a figure that will just give you a brief overview of how this data was elaborated. So just as a recall, NUTS 1 is basically all over Europe with general data, and NUTS 3 will be then the finer city level of data that is compiled, so that you have the building stock characteristics and the population that is there, combined with the heating degree days, and that will together be broken down to the hectare level, so 100 times 100 meters, so fairly small ratio for, let's say, district heating planning at city level, and will be enriched with a certain methodology that's given here in more detail to really bring you out the heat density map that we have been looking at. And personally, as also having been active as a researcher in the field, I think the way that the data is gathered here and the different explorations are possible, you can really quickly get a hand on not only on the data, as we have been doing it with this minor little exercise here, but also on the what is behind there and how has this data been created, so that you have an idea of how you're going to use this data as an input for your work, and what is the risk that you take, what are the hypotheses behind this, so that you're aware of certain limitations that might apply, or other hypotheses that you make or that may have been already included in the work that we have here. And I think that is really a major advantage of giving you a guideline through the data and gathering this information and making it quickly exploitable without you requiring to download the data set, playing around on the computer with it, having a first feeling, and then going back and saying, okay, it might be useful. Then we go and take a look at all the documentation that's available. Within the data sets that we have here, if I go back now to the EnerMaps platform, you'll see that you have different data sets, and compared, for example, to HOTMAPS, you'll see that there are other data sets that exist. The field is a little bit larger, as it's EnerMaps. It's aiming at energy data as a large, and not only data that's required for heat planning. And once the final version is approaching, you will always see a quick map of what kind of data already is available here in the abstract form. And yeah, it allows you to really quickly go towards that data. And yeah, as I said, I invite you to scroll through this first list. You find on our EnerMaps homepage the complete list of data sets that's available. But as I said, also shortly, this list will be online here so that you can access it quickly through the data sets. I didn't check yet whether there were any more questions that came up.
There is a question.
There is a question.
Jakob.
Yes. So is there a possibility to interact with EnerMaps directly through the database, e.g. through API calls? Of course, there is. And that's a great question. Thank you. Can we just go to maybe back to the presentation if I stop sharing so I can show you the setup? Would be slide 42. So if there are any more questions, feel free to, I can always come back to the platform. Yes, exactly, that's it. So what I have shown you here is basically the entry through the gateway where you can go through the visualization tool that will slowly be also linked to the wiki. As a user, you can also, of course, go directly to the analysis tool that I just showed, which is also a possibility. Or you have the API that is also being documented and exposed that can then directly go into the database and look for it. And as I said earlier, those ways are complementary, but of course, calling an API requires you to write a couple lines of code. Or there are a few more or less automatic tools on this, but that's rather a bit more complicated than going the way that I have just been doing. But of course, this is foreseen and can be then explored in the next level. For example, if you have gone through the visualization tool and think, yeah, that's really a cool data set that helps us advance in the research, then you can do the effort of using the API and doing the calls. And that is basically also the same thing that we do when we access the visualization tool. Is we have some general API calls that will provide the data that is then visualized on the front end. And you can then with this API create, for example, your own front end, or if we come back, you can also extend EnerMaps itself, because the API then can help you to write your own calculation modules that you can then ask us to include. If you feel like sharing them, at least the code itself is open source and open access. It's on our GitHub repository, and you see that there is still ongoing development. So there are commits every week. I think the code itself is well documented and quite intuitive. So feel free to take a look and ask us questions also directly on the code if you have some, or if you want to add features or combine projects that exist, because that is quite in the interest of EnerMaps, of giving you a first way of advancing, but basically showing you all the availability of different ways and means of accessing data and working with it. So feel free to take a look. The link is also on the EnerMaps portal or on the website, or you can just type in GitHub and EnerMaps, and you will find our repository right away. Where you see then the basic calculation module CM that I just documented, or that I just explained, and there are the additional ones coming up shortly, so that you can see them, and they will also be on the YouTube, so that you can see really a live a way of using it without having to read maybe boring documentation. So there you walk through it step by step so that you can see what you're doing. I hope I answered this question.
We have another one.
As we see another one regarding the API calls in detail. Again, I would there point you towards our GitHub repository, and we will send you the link so that you can that you can take a look on that. So far in the last time, we have really been focusing on the front end. because that is what the most users will see at first. And in the second part, we'll focus on really documenting well the API and making it available so that you can also start on your own calls in case there are interesting data sets that you would like to use and exploit in one another way. We'll share the link. Normally it's there, exactly. So you have the EnerMaps link there and you see the different repositories that exist, and feel free to get in touch with us in case you have questions once you have looked through it. And I guess we'll be happy also to think about producing this API video. Maybe you're the one that will be testing it first. I don't know if there are any other questions right away. I would go then to the next slide and maybe just quickly, yeah, as I said, there are just the basic difference is the entry point for the user. As I said before, it's important to aim at different users. As I get here now, questions regarding the API, which I would rather characterize for somebody that has coding knowledge, whereas, for example, somebody that is doing more energy policy will be very happy with the visualization tool. So those different entry points are important to have in mind, even though both people in the end use the same data. So with that, I'll conclude. I see, is it possible to get, and there's another question, is it possible to get maybe some demos on how to extract data, for example, about electricity price for a region? We'll take this question, I think, to the training sessions, which we'll explain in more detail shortly. Of course, that is quite possible because you only need to restrict the query itself on the database or within the API request on a certain region. And so that's absolutely feasible. And that's also what basically happens when the front end zooms. It won't load all the data. It will only load the part that you zoomed in. So that should also be interesting to consider, so that you don't always have to handle the whole data set. With that, I'll go to the conclusion. Feel free to keep questions coming. I'll stick around. The EnerMap tool, so it really helps you to search and discover those new energy sets overall. It helps you to have some curated data sets there. And I think with the two approaches that we have in the way of accessing it, we have really the high coverage approach with the low selectivity, or the high selectivity approach, but a low coverage. We have the ping pong in the two ways that in the end address the different user needs and hope will help you advance in your work quicker and faster. We as a EnerMaps consortium are very happy with the first beta that's online. We are also still working on improvements and happy to share a next version coming up shortly with you, so that especially on the front end, the usage gets more intuitive. And then the tutorial and trainings will follow, so that you can also build your skills based on that new version. So with that, I think I'll stop. If you have more questions, as I said before, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we'll talk a little bit more about the training that's coming up. With that, I'll be happy to hand over to Julia that will explain you that in detail.
Thank you very much, Jakob. Unless we have other questions, Clemence, or I could go on. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for this space. Clemence, we can start with the presentation. Next slide, please. So I'm going to introduce you the capacity building program and the training that e-think takes care of for the EnerMaps project. The key aspects that we will ensure our capacity building program has is that it will be overarching. The content will be easy to understand. It will be an interactive training program, and the aspects of the platform that will be explored and explained will be tailored on the user's needs. Next slide, please. Concerning the training content, we will make sure it will be overarching because it will cover the gateway. So every user participating in our training will learn how to find and reuse scientific publications. Sorry, how to find them on the gateway and reuse them either on the tool or on their own modeling systems. And then they will learn how to find and reuse not only data, but also research results. Exploring the tool, so the visualization tool, users and participants of the trainings will learn how to use the calculation modules and they will learn more about their inputs and outputs. And through the process, they will be exposed to the concept of open science and discover the true potential of open science, not only through EnerMaps, but through other tools such as HOTMAPS, which inspired the EnerMaps project, and OpenAir, which provided the model for the gateway. And next slide, please. The user-oriented approach that we adopt in structuring the training stems from the finding that our target user groups will be mainly three: science and research, industry, and public administrations. So these three groups entail different professional profiles. In science and research, we identify potential users among energy professionals, both in universities and in other research organizations, academia, and students. In industry, we could have attract users from professionals in energy utilities, energy companies, especially regarding renewable energies, technologies, and then energy managers and energy planners. And in public administrations, EnerMaps could be a very useful tool for officers operating within the energy sectors, as well as public administration consultants and policymakers. Next slide, please. So looking at the group science and research, if you belong to that group, you will learn how to find data and publication to support your energy-related research, attending our EnerMaps trainings. And this will include learning about the metadata of the data sets that are published on the gateway, the level of quality and granularity that is explicitly indicated. Then you will discover a new way of publish your own research outcome or disseminating your own publications. We will explore together how to integrate the calculation modules results, so through the EnerMaps tool in your own research, and then how to download and reuse validated and quality check databases on your own modeling systems. Next slide, please. For the industry target user group, the use that we foresee of the gateway and the tool will be a bit different, because in the industry, we don't expect users to want to support their research or publish publications. These users will be more interested in having an easy access to databases and insights to inform their decision-making or their decision-making process. Or they will be interested in meeting their consultants' large data needs with curated open data sets that are accessible both through the tool and the gateway. Or again, to run a quick analysis through the calculation modules and available on the visualization tool. Next slide, please. The use that users from the public administration, next slide, please. Thank you, thanks a lot. The use that will be done from users coming from the public administration will be again a bit different. These users will want a fast and easy tool to find and analyze reliable and up-to-date data to develop and implement coherent and efficient policies for their municipalities or their local administration energy transition. So they will be more interested in downloading and reusing the curated data sets in their own or in their consultants' models. Again, more focused on this aspect rather than the open science and the dissemination channels for their own publications, rather than the metadata and granularity and level aspect and quality level aspects of the data sets. Next slide, please. So coming to our upcoming training appointments, the next training will happen on October 28th, which is next Thursday, from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. European Central Time. It will be a skill workshop entitled, called Open Access Energy Data and Calculation Modules. And it will be part of the EMP, the Energy Modeling Platform for Europe annual event that this year is dedicated to re-energizing sustainable transitions in Europe. And the theme of the day in which this workshop will take place will be collaborative and transparent modeling. So this will be an interactive training of an hour and a half. If you want to register, registration will be open until the same day. The link is posted here in the slide. Could we also share it in the chat? So just for simplicity. And after this workshop, we will have a series of other trainings. Next slide. So one will be on November the 23rd. Previous one, please. We just skipped one. Thanks a lot. So on November the 23rd, we will have a training at the Data Science Conference Europe happening in Belgrade. That will be from 4:10 to 4:45 in the afternoon. And it will be possible to attend in a hybrid format, both in person in case you pass by Belgrade or online. As soon as the link to register and connect will be available, we will share that on our social media channels. The following training event will take place at ENLIT Europe, the conference and event dedicated to energy utilities. That will be in Milan on the 2nd of December at 1:30 p.m. Again, the participation to this event is foreseen in a hybrid format. Then next slide, we will have another event at the 18th International Conference on Environmental, Cultural, Economic and Social Sustainability of the University of Granada, organized with the collaboration of the On Sustainability. That will be at the end of January, between 26th and 28th. We are still waiting for the precise date, and more info will be posted as soon as we have that. Again, at the beginning of next year, we will have some training events dedicated to students. Two will be at the TU Wien and Helmut Graham Institute, and more will be posted on our social media and our website. And then one more event to come next year. Next slide, please. Will be the World Sustainable Energy Days 2022. That will happen in Wels, Austria, at the very beginning of March. And as soon as the program will be public, we will disseminate that on our channels and social media. And next slide. This is all from the training program of EnerMaps. I don't know if there are any questions. I see something on the chat.
Julia, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I don't see from the audience, but I have one actually. Could you precise if the trainings will be dedicated to users? So if I am somebody working on urbanism or planning, is there a specific training I should follow more than another one?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, actually, we have this approach to training. So we have developed a number of exercises that will be specific for your target user group, but the training themselves will not be divided. So there will not be a training only for research, science and research. There will not be one only for industry. We do expect that, for instance, in ENLIT, we will have a higher participation of users coming from the industry and the public administration. So we'll focus more on that. But because we ask for a registration form, and in the registration, we ask to specify the affiliation before each and every of these training, we know more or less who is attending. And this is how we adapt the training to the audience. But you don't need to attend more than one training unless you really fall in love with EnerMaps. And you don't need to skip a training and rather attend another one, because you will see all the functionalities in each and every one of the trainings. And then again, we will interact with the audience to make sure that we have shown everything that they wanted to discover. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I was also wondering what kind of material the participant needs to bring. I guess a computer, but better a computer, a tablet. It will depend maybe of each user.
Yes.
So what would you advise?
Well, most of our trainings will be, it will be possible to attend them on a hybrid format. So many participants will connect anyway from their laptop. To those participants that come in person, we will encourage bringing their laptop, especially because of the interactive part. Because basically our trainings will not be just a presentation of the platform, but we will engage the participants in searching for their own publications on the gateway, or searching terms that they work on a daily basis on the gateway portal, and then try some calculations with the calculation modules, try and download the data set and reuse that, for instance, on HOTMAPS, or if they have other modeling platforms, like if they use GIS or QGIS or similar tools to download and reuse this data on their platforms. So a laptop would be welcome. I don't think that, well, both the gateway and the visualization tool are accessible through tablets and mobile phone, but because of the menus, we don't recommend accessing them through these devices.
Yes, exactly. I would just like to point that out. It surprisingly works well, but still, we have not developed this for a cell phone or a mobile phone, and neither for a tablet. I think it's more the Office PC where you have a big screen and the ability to see maps, which is an advantage.
Yeah, it depends how often you check a heat density map on your mobile phone. I personally do it from my laptop.
Of course. Okay, thank you, Julia. So for the future participants, may be better to come with your own laptop. And the next one in presence will be in Enlit Europe in Milan, the 2nd of December.
Yes, and in presence also, you can attend the one in Belgrade.
Okay, very well. So you can anyway find all our information, our events on our website. I don't see any questions, but if some questions come after, you can also get in touch with us through our email, info@enermaps.eu, or simply through our social media that you have here on the screen. So we are present on Twitter and LinkedIn. A question just arrived, so let's take part of that. So very impressive functionalities, great. One question is how you integrate databases that are not your own, unlike HOTMAPS.
Well, I think I'll take this one, and Eric, feel free to complete. So basically what we did in HOTMAPS was to combine data and create more or less our own data. So yes, you're right. It's a bit easier to do it this way. Here, what we did is we really reviewed the data, as Eric explained, and selected a data set based on the criteria that was available, and then basically we would do it like you might do it yourself: is download it and integrate it. But we have to respect all the legal challenges, and this is why there are not so many as initially planned available, because there are data sets out there that are great and would be of value. However, we cannot, for example, integrate it because the license does not allow us to redistribute the data, which EnerMaps is doing. So that's, as I pointed out, the legal challenge that we have to be aware of when we use that data. And then we have a number of automatism in the background that allow us to update data sets automatically. But that requires, again, metadata on the database side so that we know when the database is updated. And normally this can be done, for example, with the Zenodo database, where you can then increase the version number. And once there's a new version, we take a look every couple of months and update that. And then use the latest version so that the version that is available is already up to date. And that's another challenge that's a bit tricky, because a lot of people do provide databases, but they do not version the data. So unless you really take a look in the database itself, and you can compare one-to-one the data that is there, you don't really realize that it's updated, because people just update it, and then there is a new version, and okay, fine. But you don't have the time, of course, to look at all the communications around the databases to see that now they communicated something. This needs to be automated in the metadata, so that we see the version 1 is now available, and next the version 2 is available, so that we can then download the version 2, integrate it, do the quality check in case we need to redo the quality check, and upload it. And then we did not explain this today in detail, but basically what is behind there is also this restructuring process to be sure that it can be pointed out, that can be visualized correctly. That means that the columns are sometimes a little bit switched and so on, so that the queries still, the generic queries that we wrote still work. This is work that's going on in the background with an integration script based on the data source that we have, so that that we can update that and work with it. Did I answer your question with that? I think I went large.
Yes, positive. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Jakob.
Clémence?
I don't know if, yeah.
This is Julia. One thing that I forgot to mention is, but I saw the YouTube link passing in the chat. We have recently published a number of videos on the calculation modules, and we will keep publishing on YouTube and link them on the EnerMaps website the future trainings. So in case there are users that cannot participate to the live trainings, they will always be able to find them there.
Yes, absolutely. So all the events we are doing more or less will be recorded. So everything will be archived on the YouTube playlist that is directly linked in the website. Anyway, absolutely. There is already available some demonstration that you did with the rest of the consortium. So that is already available. You can already consult it. If there are no other questions, I would invite you to, we will maybe close the webinar now. We're almost there. Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to ask you also if you could give us your opinion, filling in a questionnaire. So we shared the link in the chat. This questionnaire would be very helpful for us also for preparing the future training. So feel free to participate. We would very much appreciate. Thank you, Jakob. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Julia, for this presentation. And I wish you a very good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Clémence, and thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Clémence. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.